I'd like to spend the next few minutes to introduce you to CLT Future 2040, which is a comprehensive plan that will really talk about how Charlotte is going to be shaped in terms of its physical structure over the next 20 years. Now, first off, it's feeding off of the guiding vision that Council talked about earlier this year, which is really to create a community that is more inclusive, that's diverse, but that's also safe and thriving as well. Now, the genesis of this is partly, really, as we went through our Unified Development Ordinance and our place types over the last several months, there were a number of things that we heard, not just from you, but also from the community, as well as from our Planning Commission, with regards to the place types. Comments such as they were not aspirational enough, people did not really understand the connection between the place types and the UDO, or whether the content was just not something that was easily grasped. So in response to that, we kind of took a step back and asked how we could continue to do work on our Unified Development Ordinance, but also do something that's all-embracing and all-encompassing, even for Charlotte in terms of our vision for the future. So enter Charlotte Future 2040, which is really talking about a community vision that we can all share together that talks about our growth as a community, our rapid pace of development, but also where do we place our capital infrastructure, investment in our capital infrastructure. Hence the need for a comprehensive plan. We've been talking a lot about unifying our development ordinance, which, as you know, is really about 8 different documents, not just the zoning ordinance, but also different regulations that will come together. But we've not been talking about unifying a lot of plans that we have in place. We've got a lot of plans. We've got sustainability plan, we've got water, we've got transportation, we've got transit, we've got airport master plan, and there's really not one document out there that talks about pulling all of the policies and the plans together in such a way as to provide a framework for the growth of our community. Not only that, we are the 17th largest city in the United States, and I have a list there that you might not be able to read very well, but that's the list of about 30 comparable cities in the country, and of all of them, Charlotte is really the only one without a comprehensive plan. Not only that, we're the only city with the largest city in the Southeast and the largest city, obviously, in the state without one. The North Carolina law specifies that some ordinances, like the zoning ordinance, shall be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan. The way we've been responding to that is through general development policies, or maybe our most recent one, centers, corridors, and wedges. While those had their times and they were good for the times that they were developed, but they were not necessarily aspirational enough. One advantage that we have in North Carolina is that while the law specifies that, it also did not mandate what that comprehensive plan should look like. So we've been able to do some of our plans, but without necessarily a plan that will be able to tell us what exactly are we going to look like 20 years from now. So Charlotte Future is supposed to help us define that. How are we going to look as a community over the next 20 years? One thing that is also going to do that other plans have not really done well for us is that it's going to link together with existing plans that we have, but it's also going to incorporate some big policies that we have, such as we have a transit plan that I talked about, transit system plan. It's going to update a number of area plans that we have. We've got about 55 different area plans. Some of them are as old as 1992, 93. The most recent one, the one that the Southern Vision Plan that we adopted here a few weeks ago, we're going to take a good look at some of those area plans and update them, the older ones, about the same time as we embark on this comprehensive plan. Some of those plans will also be consolidated when necessary. We were going to do that as part of the place types, but going through a comprehensive plan process helps us to do that. One thing that I'll also quickly mention here is that we're not just talking about city-wide plans, but we're also talking about policies in relevant county documents, such as policies related to public facilities like open space, parks and recreation, schools facilities, libraries. We're going to do that. We're going to be working with our police department and our fire department in terms of what do you see into the future in terms of 10 years, 20 years? What are those policies that currently guide how we locate facilities that the public will have access to in the future? Again, the last time that Charlotte did this was 1975, and it's about time for us to have another comprehensive plan that really tells the story of a growing community. What are the elements of a comprehensive plan? Before I quickly run through this, we looked at a number of comprehensive plans across the country, including the one in Raleigh. But we wanted one that would not only look at everything from the 30,000-foot level in terms of policies, but will also be detailed enough to be able to graphically communicate exactly the type of community that we want to be. We found that in the plan OKC, which was Oklahoma City's plan that was developed some months ago. Oklahoma City, of course, is comparable in terms of size and population with us, and not exactly Charlotte, but there are certain things that we felt that we could learn from those plans, and especially that. But there are also certain things that we also have in existence today that we can really incorporate into this comprehensive plan. So we're proposing 7 elements as part of that. One, obviously, is what's our community vision and values. What are those things that make us uniquely Charlotte? We definitely need to talk about that. 2 is our livable and connected city. Previously, the place types was only going to speak to our land use and our community design. It wasn't going to talk about a whole lot of other things. But when we start talking about a livable and connected city, that's where you make the connection between mobility and land use. Then we'll talk about how inclusive our city should be going forward. This is where we talk about affordable housing, economy, mobility, social equity. We're going to talk about our healthy city, the food systems, the sustainability plan. We're going to be talking about our prosperous and innovative city. A lot of times now we're hearing about automotive, connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles. How do we accommodate all of these innovations in the future, 10, 20 years from now? And then, of course, there's going to be a focus on Center City as well as the role of Charlotte in the region. Finally, that plan will not be a plan unless we start talking about the implementation aspect of it, which will be the realization of our vision. Perhaps the game changer for this comprehensive plan will be how we approach our community engagement. It's not just going to be about going out and talking to people like we've done. Really, I'd like to be able to reach about 25,000 people or more, and that's doable. But also, it's very important that we look at it in such a way as to achieve balanced outcomes. So we're going to be looking at a comprehensive plan with an equitable lens. We're going to be looking not just in terms of racial equity, but also even in terms of social equity. What are those voices in the community that have been lacking, that have been missing in the last efforts that we've been making to develop plans in our community? So before we even embark at all on doing this comprehensive plan, we are setting out with a strategy sprint on August 8th to really be able to get the community to come out and really tell us, how do you want this community engagement? What do you want it to look like? How should it look? So it doesn't become the same thing that we've done over and over for the last many years. Of course, you're interested in what exactly should we be expecting as an outcome of this plan. I'm talking about a plan that will be developed over a 2-year period, so what happens in the process while development continues to go on? Well, we definitely have taken a step back to look at what should our world look like today before we even adopt a UDO or before we adopt a comprehensive plan. What are those things that we can fix in the near term in our zoning ordinance and our regulations that can really deliver development, but at the same time also make sure that input from the community is taken into consideration. So I've divided it into administrative fixes, so to speak, as well as technical fixes. We believe that we can actually deliver these ones within the next 6 to 12 months. To come before you and be able to say that we've streamlined our rezoning process. If you will give the planning director some administrative flexibility to take care of some things, but also what are those things in our transit-oriented development ordinances that we can bring back to you early next year for you to adopt so that we can continue to make positive changes around our stations. Like I mentioned, we're going to have a community engagement process that is very inclusive. And then, of course, as part of the budget for this fiscal year, you did approve the streamlining the development process, so the one-stop shop as we moved into planning, definitely that's going to roll out in the next couple of months here. So we feel that by doing some of these things, we do not have to wait until the UDO is done or a comprehensive plan is done before we can start making the development process more effective and more efficient for folks. Here is a tentative schedule snapshot. I will come back at some point in the future once we have a consultant on board to really clean this up, but this is the starting point. So the goal here is to make sure, understanding that we've got a couple elections in our future, and we've also got a couple of major events, such as the All-Star in 2019 and also the convention in 2020. We want to make sure that we do not lose the ability to engage the community, but also not lose the ability to come before you and allow you to be able to have your input in the process. So a lot of things will be going on. But at the end of the day, we want to have a draft comprehensive plan back to this body September of 2020, and at the same time have a preliminary draft of our Unified Development Ordinance that same year, but January of 2020 to have a draft of the Unified Development Ordinance. We have a consultant on board that's experienced with other communities that started the Unified Development Ordinance and stopped to embark on a comprehensive plan. And so we believe that this is achievable. Remember that at the January retreat, I had mentioned that we were going to come with the Unified Development Ordinance draft summer of 2020. So that's going to shift for a few years because there is no way we can have a very successful comprehensive plan without pushing some things out a little bit in our Unified Development Ordinance. At the end of the day, though, I'm also being mindful of certain key events that are going to be taking place in Charlotte over the next couple of years that we don't want to create any sort of inability of the public to get engaged in the process. So next steps. I would like to be able to read the Charlotte Observer, whatever newspaper tomorrow, and see Charlotte Future instead of UDO. That's really the dream. Because at the end of the day, it's hard to engage the community with regulatory tools, but you can engage the community with a vision. When we talk about setting a vision for the next 20 years, obviously people say 20 years, that's a long time. But we do know that comprehensive plans by their nature are also flexible enough that we can revisit them in 5 years' time, take another relook at how we're growing, at the trends, and fix them again at that particular point in time. It's supposed to be able to break things down in periodic manners, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But I'd like to be able to redirect our attention as a community to the vision rather than to the regulation. And then I've asked one of our division managers in the department, Gary Johnson, to actually be our project manager for this. So over the last several weeks, she's been pulling together an interdepartmental foundation team. But not only are we reaching out to our colleagues within the departments of the city, but also outside in the county as well. We're going to be having the design or strategy sprint, like I mentioned before, on August 8th. The goal is to have a consultant on board, hopefully in September. So I'll be coming back August 27 and also September 10 to present that to you as well. But one of the things we've heard over and over is the fact that you all as a council want to be involved in this process. You want to have some level of ownership. So I can commit to you that on a periodic basis, I'll come before you and kind of share with you where we are in the process. So it's really about creating our future together as a community, and I'll be here to answer questions that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Bakari?
Yeah, good presentation. We've had multiple conversations of it, and seeing it articulated like this, I think shows that you guys have put even more thought into it and you've got a good view. I think the way to kind of, for any of those in the audience who have been following this for the last decade or so, the way to kind of think about it is Taiwo came on board not that long ago, and he had inherited something called the UDO. And I think after much analysis, we did not punt on the UDO. We are still doing the UDO, but you realized that the UDO was one part of a broader set of things in a certain set of orders that needed to happen. And I applaud you for that, but I think you probably realize at this point, while you had inherited the thing called UDO, the Charlotte Future is your thing. Right? So clearly, my hope is that 7, 8, 10 years from now, there's not another council who's like, we need to rebrand Charlotte Future because that thing's been around too long and nothing actually happened. And I think I love what I saw there. I think the one piece of advice I would give is, in engaging the community, you need to figure out a way to shock them into being involved in this. Because a bunch of feel-good community forums and meetings, that's been happening for, almost a decade now with this stuff. I think here's one example. Go out and pick a parcel next to every major neighborhood association in the city and send almost a fake note on the front of one side that says, we're going to turn this into...
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
But the point is this, and I think the response there is what you need to see. Everybody's, kumbaya, feel good, up until the moment that they activate, where they're like, whoa, that means that this can happen, and they don't realize this is that conversation now. So whatever it takes to shock these folks into it, I would think creatively, maybe not that far, to my colleagues' good pushback, but something that will let them realize, if you don't want a coffee shop or affordable housing or this or that, now's your time to raise your hand and justify your reason. Because when we get down, after this is all in future state, when we get down to voting, we're going to follow this. And we're not going to be a deal-based city, hopefully, anymore. We're going to be a process-based city. So I applaud you, but that is a lot of work.
Mr. Eggleston?
No, I just wanted to swat that idea down.
Oh, I thought you had a question. Dr. Harlow?
So thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. So Mr. Planning Director, yeah, you, as Mr. Bakari said, you definitely inherited kind of something that I think is good thought on the whole, and you've kind of come in, and I applaud you on recognizing, hey, we need a larger plan and a vision to implement, kind of the more technical things that we were leading with originally. I do want to, and you got to have some real strong shoulders, you're going to be carrying this whole thing for years to come. But back to the community engagement piece, and I'm glad that you centered some of your slides around that. We know there are a lot of issues in this community, and we have a lot of community leaders and advocates that want to be proactive in the process. And so I know I've sat around this dais for 7 months, like the rest of us here, and there's been a lot of concerns about, what the UDO process started as and what it is now, what we know it as now. And so this kind of step back hopefully isn't a couple years down the road, we're not saying the same thing. And I think a lot of that is because, we had a committee, UDO committee, and weren't getting constant updates. We're kind of throwing out little summits and little terms like place types, and the community's like, wait, what does that mean? Where did this come from? Where did these definitions happen? And so we're gonna hammer that nail all the way in and saying, hey, let's be sure whenever we get to this stakeholder steering committee process and inclusive community engagement, that is a big rollout that really kind of helps lead. And we understand not everyone is a master planner and architect and got a background in planning, but the community knows kind of what they have an idea about what they want in certain neighborhoods. And so having that on the front end, I would highly encourage. Yeah.
I just want to make a comment, too, about all of that, because just to remind us all that we asked staff to go down this road of the UDO, and there was a ton of engagement, a ton of work on the part of staff. And then which I certainly appreciate. In last term, when we were getting pretty far along with the UDO, people started saying, I don't understand what we're talking about. What are we creating? What are we making? So it's a very organic process once you go into it. We started, when Ty came on board, we realized, hang on, we got to really step back and say, how will those ordinances, which that too is just so critical because it's so darn tough which is why we have 7-hour zoning meetings, because our ordinances crash into each other because they are layered upon layered and they conflict with each other. So I appreciate that you are attacking the critical UDO pieces like TOD, transit-oriented development, the closest to our mass transit at the same time, because that's hard to do, but it's so important as we continue to lose valuable land and we don't really know what it is that we're asking for, where we have opportunities to put affordable housing on mass transit lines. And so it is critical that we kind of do some of that together. But I appreciate that work very much. I hope that we will also have a mapping exercise that includes the county and talks about where parks go, where's green space going to be, not that we can get them to commit to it, but schools, so that when we look at transit, we also know how people are going to get around and how they're living, and will they have things in their community that everybody would like to have? So I hope we have an opportunity to include the county in that discussion as well. Mr. Newton?
Yes, thank you, the Mayor Pro Tem. I want to thank you up front for this fantastic presentation. I understand the value in the UDO and it's streamlining our zoning process. I have expressed some of my chief concerns. I think the most prominent being how this can take the council and in our community out of that process as we streamline. So have little to no conditional rezonings, and for that reason, no renderings for development, no community meetings before development occurs. And I think that's why, so to my colleagues' points, that's why this process of community engagement, as we define what the place types are, where they're going to be, is so vitally important moving forward. And I want to make sure that we're taking proactive measures to reach out to the community, to explain just why this is so very important, that they be engaged and involved, give their input, their feedback in this process moving forward. And I wanted to ask you too, so from the standpoint of stakeholder and steering committee, which I saw up on one of the slides, what will be the process for selecting those folks? And I would ask that we, as a council, be included in that process as well.
Okay, great, thank you. So we've got a number of opportunities. We can engage either the existing ordinance advisory committee or we can engage our planning commission, but we want to be very careful. So what we're going to do is when we have a consultant on board, we're going to ask them to give us an idea as being objective folks who have done work in other parts of the country, but including Charlotte, to see how do we approach the formation of a steering committee. And we will share that with you. I've actually had a number of people have already reached out to me in terms of getting involved. But there are certain parameters. It's got to be geographically balanced. It cannot skew too much in one direction. And it's got to also not just be developer focused, but also neighborhood community focused. That's very important. And so there are a number of parameters that we're going to lay down. Right now, we do have that as part of our ordinance advisory committee, but we want to be able to reflect that if we do go this route.
So I do have a couple other council members that have comments, and I just want to ask you if we can cede our time to move on to the next topic for the Housing Charlotte framework, because we only have 20 minutes, and I know a lot of people here are interested in that discussion.
So when are we going to ask the questions?
Well, I'm just going to say, I have Mr. Winston Mayfield and Ajmira. Would you like to ask them now, or is that something that you can ask Mr.?
If we concede the questions, this is the only time that we have public conversation.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
He can come back. Do we have time for him to come back to finish the presentation where we don't have a conflict?
Yeah, I believe you're scheduled to come back next month also.
August 27 to talk more about the contract, and then September 10 again.
Does that work, or would you like to ask it tonight?
My only request is please ensure that council knows when you're going out into our districts, into community ahead of time.
Yes.
I just real quick. Ty, I know this is one of the first things that we talked about when you came here. So I want to applaud you just for being brave, because this does have some political ramifications that you're putting a process on hold. And especially a tool that many developers were trying to get clarity on. So I applaud you for doing that. But I would tell the community and my colleagues to kind of pay attention to the timeline that Ty set up. This vision is only going to be as good as the effort that is put in by us and the people that it's going to affect. We just got new carpet on the 15th floor, so I was unpacking my office again earlier today, and I took out the sheet that represent the last comprehensive plan, and what it was all the many different plans put on one sheet of paper. And that tells you a little bit about how we've been developing over the past 30 years and why we're dealing with the issues that we're dealing with. So as we continue to move on in this process, it's going to be really, really important that we continue to keep our constituents involved in this process, or it will all be for naught.
And Ms.
Yes.
Admira, do you have?
Yes, I'll also make it brief. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just like my colleagues, I would also like to applaud your leadership in taking this on. I really like how we are taking this more from the holistic approach, where we are looking at administrative as well as technical changes. For me, the tree ordinance is near and dear to my heart, and I'm glad that we are finally tackling that. We are losing 25,000 trees every year. I think we got to do something about it. So I guess economic growth and development is very important, but at the same time, the natural resources are also very important for us to be sustainable for 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So I'm looking forward to seeing the technical changes that you have to protect our natural resources and putting it in a holistic perspective from smart infrastructure to housing to good paying jobs. Thank you.